in the bustling heart of Chicago's Union Station, where the echoes of announcements mingled with the shuffle of hurried feet, Emily Harper stood frozen for a moment. Her hand trembled as she reached into her worn leather wallet, pulling out her last crumpled $10 bill. The stranger before her, a man with tired eyes and a rumpled coat, looked desperate. "Please," he said softly, "I just need enough for the train to Milwaukee. My wallet's gone is stolen, I think." Emily's heart twisted. She knew that feeling all too well. Without a word, she pressed the bill into his palm. Little did she know, this simple act would change everything. Emily was 32, a single mother with a heart as wide as Lake Michigan but pockets as empty as the winter streets. She had grown up in a small Illinois town, dreaming of the city lights, but life had a way of dimming those dreams. Her days were spent at a diner on the outskirts of the Loop, flipping burgers and pouring coffee for tips that barely covered rent. Her son, Tommy, was 7, bright-eyed and full of questions she sometimes couldn't answer. Like, "Mom, why can't we get ice cream after school?" Or "When's Dad coming back?" Her ex-husband had left 3 years ago, chasing some vague promise of a better life out west, leaving her with bills, a leaky apartment, and a quiet ache that never quite faded. That chilly autumn evening, as the sun dipped low behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the station's marble floors, Emily had been rushing to catch the last train home to her suburb. Tommy was with a neighbor, and she couldn't afford to be late. The air smelled of diesel and fresh pretzels from a nearby vendor, a comforting mix that reminded her of simpler times. But her shift had run long, and when she checked her wallet at the ticket machine, her stomach dropped. Only $10 left, exactly what she needed for her fare. No more, no less. She patted her pockets, hoping for a miracle, but found only lint and a faded receipt. That's when the stranger approached. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair peeking from under a wool cap, and a face lined with what looked like worry. His clothes were neat but outdated, like he'd dressed in a hurry. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice low and polite, with a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Maybe Midwestern, like her own. "I hate to ask, but I'm in a bind. My train leaves in 10 minutes, and I need just a bit more for the ticket. I promise, I'll pay it forward someday." Emily hesitated, her mind raced. What about Tommy? What if she missed her train? But something in his eyes genuine, vulnerably pulled at her. She'd been there before, scraping by, relying on the kindness of others. A neighbor's loaned groceries, a co-worker's shared lunch. It was how the world turned, wasn't it? One hand helping another. With a deep breath, she handed over the bill. "Here," she murmured. "I hope it helps." The man blinked, surprised, then nodded gratefully. "Thank you." "Truly." "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied, forcing a small smile. "James," he said, shaking her hand gently. "I'll remember this." And with that, he hurried off toward the ticket counter, disappearing into the crowd. Emily watched him go, a pang of regret settling in her chest. Now what? She glanced at the clock. 5 minutes until her train. No money, no ticket. She sank onto a nearby bench, the cold metal seeping through her thin coat. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help. She pulled out her phone, dialing her neighbor. "Mrs. Ruiz, can you keep Tommy a little longer? I might be walking home tonight." The walk was long, over 2 hours through dimly lit streets, past glowing storefronts she couldn't afford to enter. The wind whipped at her face, carrying a distant hum of traffic. Emily's feet ached in her scuffed sneakers, and her mind wandered to the what-ifs. What if she'd said no? What if James was just a con artist? But no, she pushed those thoughts away. Kindness wasn't about guarantees, it was about doing what felt right in the moment. By the time she reached her apartment building, the stars were out, twinkling like distant promises. Tommy was asleep on Mrs. Ruiz's couch, his small hand clutching a stuffed bear. Emily scooped him up carefully, whispering thanks to her neighbor, and carried him to their tiny unit. The door creaked as she shut it, and she tucked him into bed, brushing a kiss on his forehead. "Good night, buddy," she said softly. Exhaustion washed over her, but sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of endless trains and empty wallets. The next few days blurred into the familiar grind. Emily picked up extra shifts at the diner, smiling through the fatigue as she served plates of eggs and bacon. The regulars knew her Staria or parts of Ita and sometimes left bigger tips. "You're a good one, old Mr. Callahan would say, sliding an extra $1 across the counter. But bills piled up, rent due, Tommy's school supplies, a nagging cough that needed medicine. She skipped lunches to save, telling herself it was temporary. One evening, as rain pattered against the diner's windows, her boss pulled her aside. "Emily, you've been looking worn out. Everything okay?" She nodded, but inside, doubt crept in. Was this all there was? Endless struggle, with no light at the end? Tension built slowly, like storm clouds gathering over the city. A week after the station encounter, Emily's car wouldn't start, a dead battery, the mechanic said, quoting a price she couldn't fathom. She took the bus to work, squeezing in among commuters, her mind heavy with worry. Tommy sensed it, too. "Mom, are we okay?" he asked one night over macaroni from a box. She ruffled his hair. "Of course, sweetie, just a rough patch." But as she lay awake that night, listening to the drip of a faucet she couldn't fix, she wondered if kindness was a luxury she could no longer afford. The world felt colder, more unforgiving. What had that $10 really accomplished? James was probably long gone, sipping coffee in Milwaukee, while she scraped by. Then, on a crisp Friday morning, as Emily wiped down tables at the diner, the door chimed. She looked up, expecting another regular, but there stood James. He was transformed, clean-shaven, in a tailored suit that screamed success, a leather briefcase in hand. Her heart skipped. "Emily?" he said, his voice warm with recognition. She froze, rag in hand. "James, from the station?" He nodded, smiling broadly. "May I sit?" She gestured to a booth, her mind reeling. As she poured him coffee, he explained, "I wasn't entirely honest that day. Not about needing the money, I did, in a way, but about who I am." James Harrington was no ordinary traveler. He was the CEO of a tech firm in Silicon Valley, worth millions from maps that connected people across the globe. That day at the station, he'd been mugged, a wallet, phone, everything gone. Disguised in borrowed clothes from a shelter, he'd tested the waters of humanity, seen if kindness still existed in a rushed world. "I've done well in life," he said quietly, "but success can isolate you." I wanted to remember what real connection feels like. Emily listened, her hands steady despite the whirlwind inside. "And me? Why come back?" James leaned forward. "Because you gave without expecting anything." "That $10? It wasn't about the money. It was about trust. I wanted to repay Ida 100-fold. The twist unfolded gently, like dawn breaking over the horizon. James pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside was a check for $10,000. "For you and your son," he said. "Use it however you need, a rent, school, a new start." Emily's eyes widened, tears blurring her vision. I can't accept this." But James insisted. "You already gave me something priceless, faith and people. Let me give back." He shared his story, Moria, how he built his empire from nothing, facing rejections and hardships, much like her own. "Kindness ripples," he said. "Yours reached me when I needed it most." As the conversation flowed, Emily felt the tension ease, replaced by a warm glow. They talked for hours about dreams deferred, the joy of small victories, the strength and vulnerability. By the time James left, promising to stay in touch, the diner felt brighter, the rain outside a gentle patter rather than a storm. Emily stared at the check, her fingers tracing the numbers. It wasn't just money, it was possibility. That evening, she picked up Tommy from school early, treating him to ice cream at double scoops. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, chocolate smeared on his chin. She hugged him close. "Just a good day, kiddo." In the weeks that followed, life shifted. Emily fixed the car, paid off debts, even enrolled in night classes for a better job. But more than that, she carried a quiet insight. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, could echo back in unexpected ways. She started a jar at home, dropping in spare change to help others, a fund for strangers in need. James became a mentor, emailing advice and encouragement. Their unlikely friendship bloomed, a reminder that connections could bridge worlds. One quiet evening, as Emily sat on her balcony watching the city lights, She reflected on that fateful day, the train station, the last $10, the stranger who wasn't. Life wasn't about hoarding what little you had, it was about sharing, trusting that the universe might just share back. And to anyone listening to her story, perhaps over a cup of coffee or in the hush of a narrated tally, she had one simple call: reach out, lend a hand, even when it's your last. You never know whose life you might touch, or who might touch yours in return.